So today we're going to be talking about qualitative and mixed methods research. By the end of this chapter, you will know what the different qualitative research methods are, as well as the types of mixed methods research that people perform, and you will know how to choose the appropriate method of data collection for these types of questions. Qualitative research is often descriptive in nature, but it goes much deeper to find more meaning. It's looking into the why of something or the experience of something in order to get a deeper understanding of the subject. I think mixed methods is kind of the best of both worlds when it's done well. We are supposedly getting both the what and the why. It's a good approach, but it needs to be done well. And to be done well, it takes a lot of effort. That's why I said supposedly earlier. Sometimes people start mixed methods projects only to find out how much work it is, and then they decide they don't want to put that kind of effort in. But instead of picking a direction, going either fully qualitative or fully quantitative, they still try to report things as a mixed methods, and then they wind up doing both poorly. I was initially going to perform a mixed methods study for my dissertation because, again, I think mixed methods are a really ideal way to do research. Unfortunately, it's really not the most practical approach due to its time constraints. And I had a choice to go one way or the other, and I would have chosen to do a quantitative study because it was easier and faster in the analysis phase. If I continued down the mixed methods path, I don't believe I would have done it well. Each method has its own particular way of gathering information, as you can see on the slide. Narrative research falls along the lines of biographies or autobiographies. It's where you're going to be telling an account or story of events that's happened, and then you're going to try and connect that story or events to something of importance. Phenomenological and ethnomethodological inquiries are both about looking to make meaning of shared experiences. Ethnographies are done mostly through participant observation. The researcher immerses themselves within a culture that they want to study and is actually a part of that culture while recording their observations. While phenomenologies are typically done through multiple interviews where the participants share what it's like to be a part of a particular phenomena in order to give a complete picture of the experience to the researcher. A case study is exactly what it sounds like. You take one case and you look at it in depth. These are often not generalizable, but can oftentimes be published and are often the first important step into further research where experiments are designed based on what you found in the case. Lastly, we go to my personal favorite, which is grounded theory. A grounded theory study is where you're actually going to do little searching in the literature prior to starting your study. You're going to basically look to see if anybody's already answered your question. And even if they have, you still may do your own theory to see if you come up with the same stuff, because you don't want to do much more than that because you don't want to bias any of your results. So what we mean by that is in grounded theory, you want to let the data do all the talking for you. The data will take you wherever the data takes you. So you ask your question and you gather the data, and then you analyze the data that's there. You're going to be looking for patterns in the data, which become themes, and the themes can become a theory. But it's important to let the data drive the themes and conclusions in the theory and not any preconceived notions you may have. Then once you're done with your analysis, you will go back to the literature to see where your findings fit within the current literature and knowledge base. Gathering qualitative data from current patients can actually help improve their experience with you, your care, and your program. You'll notice that when you look at the data collection types of things, that there is no testing or pre or post testing for numbers. There's nothing like that. We do interviews in qualitative types of things, in which case you need to have an interview guide that lists the questions you want to ask all of your participants. Even if it's a semi-structured interview where you can ask follow-up questions as things come up, you still want to have a group of questions that you will ask everyone for consistency. It will also help you keep the interview on track, as it helps keep from going off the rails, as people tend to do sometimes when they start talking about things that are not germane to your question. The interview guide can help you bring it back. When you're taking information for an interview that you're doing, you want to make sure that you require more than 1 to 2 word answers. Remember, in qualitative work, you are exploring a topic, so you want them to expound as much as possible, as long as they're on topic. You want to avoid the double barrel questions, even as an interviewer, when you can explain things, because you will have to clarify things to the interviewee, and also asking double barrel questions is just bad form. Sometimes it is worth it to simply go and observe a situation or phenomena to gather information to help answer your question. It's generally best to do this discreetly as possible to avoid social desirability bias or observer bias, which in both cases is where people will act differently because they know they're being observed. There are a number of ways you can use documents, videos, or audio files in research. Many times what we're going to do with these types of files is use these artifacts to do what's called a discourse analysis, which is where we're going to look at more than simply the words that were said. We'll be looking at the tone in which they're said, the cadence in which they're said, the emphasis of how things are said, or even the body language in addition to the actual words that are said. So same as with quantitative research, in a qualitative research, your question will be determined by your, will help determine your research design or plan. When we are using a qualitative method of inquiry, we have to talk about saturation. In a quantitative study, we make power calculations that will tell us how many participants we need, or sometimes we just end up taking what we can get as far as our numbers go. In a qualitative research study, we talk about saturation. We will continue to take in data until we reach what we call a saturation point. Saturation point is when you are no longer collecting new information with your data technique. So how many surveys or interviews that takes is not a set number. You just go until it's appropriate to stop due to saturation. We see that as people keep saying the same things and you are not getting any new information, that's when you know you've reached your saturation point. And that goes for observations as well as interviews. You will need to make sure that you have prepared your space well and gotten your people prepared for the interview, and make sure that the conduct that you exhibit is considered professional. You will need to get your participants' permission via either signed informed consent or verbally during a recorded session before you start to gather your data. The only possible exception is with observation, and even then you may have to get permission to be in the space you observe. You should also protect the anonymity of your participants. That's how you're going to get them to talk freely and share truthful information. When you're writing it up, you use pseudonyms instead of their real names to do your reporting. Pseudonyms are fake names, again, that you use to protect the identity of the participant. Also, when you write things up, in order to protect anonymity, you may need to change other identifying characteristics, such as a location or even a city. You must always allow participants to withdraw at any time for any reason. Participating in research is voluntary. You cannot coerce people into participating. It's unethical and also will likely skew your results, because people who do not want to participate voluntarily are more likely to suffer from social desirability bias. We will be discussing this in more detail in chapter 16, but what you're doing when you are coding is looking for patterns, and then you want to be able to describe that pattern. When you can put a meaning to a pattern via a description, then that pattern becomes a theme. Your themes will help you draw conclusions and possibly even create a theory. When we're doing mixed methods research, you'll be using one of the previously mentioned qualitative types of research, as well as doing some quantitative research. While the quantitative data is basically exactly the same in technique for a mixed methods project, the qualitative data is generally going to be a bit more on the descriptive side and a bit more focused on the specifics of your question, because you are trying to get to the why of your question that you're getting numbers for. That being said, we need to talk about the point of interface for the two data sets. The two data sets you are collecting have to have some point of interaction, or all you have is two separate studies using different methodologies that are being done simultaneously and not a mixed method study. The point of interface is determined by the methodology you choose. If you have chosen an exploratory sequential model, then you are exploring via the qualitative part and then adding the quantitative part to put numbers to your why. In an explanatory sequential model, you are going to do the numbers part first and then follow up with the qualitative part to answer the why. Either way, you're performing these steps in a sequence, one after the other. But if you choose to do a convergent parallel model, you do the qualitative and quantitative parts simultaneously. Lastly, we have our reminder to adhere to good research ethics, including confidentiality. We will get significantly more in depth with the ethics of research as you do your human research protected foundational training and through reading the book of The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks and in Module 3, Chapter 11.